So, really lovely group of kids. I mean,
They are.
amazing.
Yeah, I have to agree. They are very
And you've
special.
obviously established a real rapport.
Yeah,
with
well,
them.
I'm with them 24/7. I'm their class master, and I teach them Hungarian too. So we are very tight.
Right.
Yeah.
So, let's go through the lesson. So, could you talk me through the stages of the lesson?
Sure.
You know, what actually happened in relation to what you intended and what your aims were for the stage.
So there was a lead-in discussion where I wanted to talk about their TV watching habits in general. That happened. And then I asked them to focus on the board, and there were some tiles with pictures. And I wanted them to work in pairs to identify what kind of a TV show or TV program they can see, and then I got feedback from them about that. And a lot of things became clear about their use of words related to TV, like if they understand the word series, if they can use it correctly or not, certain pronunciation issues even. So it was a very, very
Do you
interesting
remember anything
stage.
concretely then?
Yeah, that was the series thing, like they weren't sure if it was a singular or plural or what. That was something I remember, and maybe expressions like live instead of live or something like that, like a live show.
Yes.
Or maybe it happened later, but issues like this.
Where did the idea of using the pictures with the words on the back come from? Is that something you do a lot? Or?
Yeah. I really like the interactive whiteboard, and it has a lot of interactive solutions. And I think just giving them visual aid is really good. They like working with that. And if you just make it a little bit more interesting with like revealing certain words or making those words disappear, it makes the lesson more interesting. So they can look at the two things at the same time, either the photo or the expression itself, and something happens that catches their attention.
Nice, right. Okay.
Yeah,
and then it was the full class thing after that, the discussion.
Yeah. So they were talking about the ideas that they shared as a pair, so that we could eventually focus on reality TV only and not all sorts of different genres. And then I was also interested in how much they know about reality TV, whether they watch it or not, whether they admit watching it or not, and they have some very serious ideas about that too, whether it's sad to watch these shows or educational. And I think there were a couple of differing opinions too, and it was very interesting to see. And then I was trying to bring them closer to the future reading. And since in the reading there was a summary activity where they were given summary statements and they had to find a paragraph that statement would match, I thought that it would be a nice start to bring them closer, to show them those statements without actually telling them that those are the summary sentences of a text, so that they had a look at them and they try to agree or disagree with those statements, or just simply share experiences, what comes to their mind when they see these. And it was the next stage where they worked in pairs, and every pair was given a different statement, so not everybody got the same. And it's a nice thing because when it comes to feedback, then there are a lot of different ideas, and they are made to listen to each other because they can hear some other topics than theirs. So it's not always the same old topic 6 times or 7 times because every pair was discussing those.
So part of that was to prepare them for the reading as well, so them getting those statements.
Indeed, and some of the statements included vocabulary I wanted them to understand, or just to have a look at that specific set of vocabulary to make sure that maybe there are some words that they don't understand. And when it comes to those summary statements, it would be nice if they understood the summary statements and focused on the text and not the other way around.
Right.
So I wanted to get that out of the way.
With the vocabulary that was in those summary statements, was that when you talked about one of the aims of the lesson being vocabulary? Is that the kind of vocabulary you were talking about? Are those the actual phrases you're talking about?
I wasn't sure. I didn't see anywhere that would be super complicated for them. There is a more diverse set of vocabulary in the text itself. And since I wanted them to focus on that set of vocabulary eventually, I wanted to get everything else out of the way this way, So
I
when
see.
they were talking about these statements in pairs, I could make sure that they understood those. I walked around, I elicited it very quickly so that it's not something that they would focus on until the end of the lesson.
Okay, I see. So the vocabulary aim was addressed more later.
Yes,
During
which is
the
actually
reading.
the next stage because, or starts at the next stage because they read the text for the first time after having talked about these statements together as a group. And yeah, they were working on their own. They had to match the paragraph summary statements with the paragraphs themselves. And then when we started talking about that, they also had to summarize the paragraphs together with not just saying, okay, this statement matches this paragraph and let's move on, but they actually had to talk about what is in that paragraph. And that...
Which part do you mean? So when did they have to
So
do that?
when this whole stage of doing the reading task individually happened, after that there is a group feedback where we talk about the solutions, and they also had to talk about each paragraph in detail.
Right, okay.
To tell me what they think the paragraph is about. And that was actually a longer stage than I planned. I think I just didn't think about how time-consuming it is to actually talk through the text. And I don't think it's a problem, I just didn't plan ahead. So I kind of started losing time somewhere there, even more than with the discussions at the beginning, which is fine. I just have to realize that whenever you check an exercise like this, whether they have done the matching correctly, it's not only about saying A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, but they actually should talk more about the text.
Right,
And at
okay.
that point they did that, and it was nice to see.
And did that timing affect things, or how did that timing affect things after that in the lesson in terms of what you pacing or what you cut out?
Well,
or?
I cut out probably 1 or 2 stages at the end, which is fine because, yeah, I actually assigned them 1 stage homework that I initially planned to be in the lesson about this vocabulary definition matching thing, and that's fine. But I will get to that when, you know,
When we talk about that, okay. Okay.
Because then, after we talk about these paragraphs or what the text is about one by one, then they have to go back to their partner and do a true or false activity on the same text, so that they would actually start focusing on relevant pieces of vocabulary. And they were allowed to do it in pairs because that way they would feel more comfortable if they don't understand something, or they could ask each other about the meaning of different words. But I made sure to create this task in order for them to focus on the vocabulary. So each and every true or false statement targeted a part of the text where there was a word they needed to understand, or they needed to relate to the statement in order to make it true or false.
I see. So that was more, so the aim of the true or false was partly to zero in on the vocabulary.
To focus on the vocabulary.
Okay.
That's right.
It was interesting what happened in the true and false section, which was just what you said before the lesson you thought might happen, which is that they talked more about.
Yeah, they actually started talking more about their opinion, and I was lucky to be able to walk around and elicit what was going on, because with a lot of pairs I had to actually point at the text and make them realize that they have to look at the new task and the original text at the same time. I think that happens a lot with them.
Interesting.
You have to keep them on task.
When you did feedback from the reading tasks, you usually ask students to read out either the statement or the part of the text, or both. Right? You had them read it out loud.
Yeah.
Is that usually what you do, or is there a reason for that?
Well, it depends on the type of the task usually, but I think there were certain words that they didn't know how to pronounce or have never had to utter before. So that was very useful for me, because words like reveal, they didn't pronounced quite right. And I heard some of those when I was walking around during the pair work activity. So that's when I knew that I would want them to read these statements out loud one more time.
I see. So mainly pronunciation, or to check pronunciation.
Partly, and partly I think it keeps them more structured, that if one student reads it out loud, then everybody else knows where we are at. Whereas if you say, yeah, next one, next one, next one, maybe some students lose track.
Right.
And they won't be able to know which statement we actually are talking about.
Okay.
One thing I didn't do, and I think I should have, and that's a good lesson for me, is that I didn't give them an instruction to make sure that they'll be able to tell me why they think that statement is true or false. So with a very simple instruction like, please underline the sentence that would relate to this, or please underline the statement why you believe so, I would have saved a lot of time. Because whenever I asked why, they were not 100% sure, and they got shyer, and some of them just stopped saying anything because they didn't know if they were giving the right answer. They were happy to find out if the statement was true or false, but they didn't really want to deal more with it in detail.
With
and
the
with such
justification,
with such a simple instruction like please underline that sentence and then read it out loud, that would have been much easier.
Good lesson for future
Yeah,
lessons.
yeah.
Okay.
And then by then, because this feedback stage already took enough time together with some previous one,
Okay.
it was basically almost by the end of the lesson. First of all, I realized that if I assign this language-focused task with the words and the definitions together with the true or false, so that the faster students would have something to do, that was, I think, a good call, because then some of them already started working on it, while it gave enough time for the others to finish the true or false. And then I can say, well, please finish that at home as homework. It's not much more than what I originally planned for them as homework, but then they would finish something I wanted to happen during the lesson. And then the other thing is vocab related as well, to come up with 5 true or false statements about their own preferences of watching TV using this new set of words.
Right. And do you think they'll do it? So do they do
I think they
homework?
will do it. Maybe for some of them, it will cause certain difficulties if they are not very comfortable with the new words. But that's why it's good that they have the original text.
Right.
So even if they just pick out complete chunks and rewrite it for their own life experience, then it's enough for me at this point, so that they know how it works in actual context.
Okay. I have a couple questions about, in a way, kind of management, classroom management things. So you interact with them a lot, kind of in a full class, so-called plenary format. And how do you normally nominate, or how do you decide who to nominate? Do you think everybody gets involved?
Yeah, well, I think here the amount of pair work was just a little bit less than what I usually do. So I always believe that in pairs they've already discussed a lot of things, and it gives them a lot of time to talk. So it's not a problem if I don't call out everybody in this plenary session. But sometimes when it comes to sharing opinions or making judgment about something, I really like who would like to talk, or they were always the same people raising their hands wanting to say stuff. And I know that what they say would actually generate more intelligent debate. So if they say whatever they want to say, other people would like to react.
Right.
So they are my first people to talk, because I know then other people would like to add their own opinion. That's one thing. Or sometimes when it comes to language, then because I've been walking around and I've heard what the pairs were working, I'm going to call those people who either had a problem or to whom I explained something that I want them to explain it to the rest of the class.
I see.
or if there was, it was a very interesting scene with the on TV, in the TV thing. Whenever that came up again, I would always call the same girl, so that she knows that now it's her task to be the accuracy person with
She's
on
never
TV
going to get
thing.
that wrong.
That's true.
Sure.
But the others will connect that bit of grammar to her, and I think that's easier for everybody to remember this scene and then get it right.
Interesting. It seemed like you got really good involvement, you know, even in this plenary format. There was one kid in the back, in the corner, he's wearing blue checked. So Mishi was sitting back center. He's quite active, and then to his right, there was
and it was also a trio and not a pair, because so that was different.
What about that? Because that boy, I don't remember him saying anything really, and he was the one. Even the girl next to him, only maybe once. And I don't know if it was because they're back row or he just never says anything.
I think the back row has something to do with it. Also, when they were working in their group, they were talking more. But the girl and the guy, the other guy, I think they are more talented at English. And this third guy is...
The girl and the guy meaning Mishi and...
Yeah.
The girl
so the
next
one
to
who
it.
didn't really talk, I think he just enjoyed listening to the other two because they like talking. I think I called him once, but you are right. I just, you know, I think I didn't pay enough attention. But I think he has more problems with English than the others. And I also know that I would put him in a very uncomfortable position if I kept asking him. And in such a situation when it really comes to, say, vocabulary, and I know he wouldn't be as strong as the others.
Right. Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that you should have
No,
called
I know,
on him more.
I know.
I noticed him, and I, you know,
Yeah.
was watching him.
As long as I can see that he's reacting with his eyes, and I saw that when they were working group, it was he was doing something and he was listening, so I can make sure that the language input is there still. Then I have a tendency to leave him alone in like upfront situations.
What's your policy on error correction, especially full class? So, I mean, you do correct errors.
It always depends on my focus, I guess. Like especially now at the beginning when it was the intro discussion and it was all opinion based, I wouldn't necessarily correct every grammatical issue, or sometimes I would repeat what they say but in a correct way. If the student is really bright and I actually know that they shouldn't make those mistakes, I would ask back, because I know very quickly they would realize what they've done wrong and they would be able to correct themselves. But this is only if the main aim is to elaborate on a topic and not focus on language. And then, my tendency usually is to ask back questions or repeat what they say so that they would realize what was going on. There was, I think, one time when they needed a word and some girl from the back started to whisper it, then I would just simply ask them to either repeat it, or I would ask the boy to listen more carefully to the one who was trying to have them out.
Yeah. They seem really quite uninhibited about speaking English in front of each other and about their mistakes. So nobody ever seemed embarrassed. And with this age group, I would have expected more kind of...
Especially if, again, when it comes to the case of that on the TV thing, we were repeating it over and over again. And it's a kind of a joyful situation, not a negative one. So they like trying harder in that way too.
What about, briefly, how the lesson went in relation to your aims? So before the lesson, we talked about it was kind of speaking, vocabulary, reading.
Well, in terms of speaking and in terms of working on this topic, I think it was even better than what I expected, because a lot of them had ideas and wanted to use these expressions. So things like the problems with the word series, how it came up. I wouldn't even think about it because I know they watch a lot of series and we talk about How I Met Your Mother a lot. But then in such a direct situation, it turns out that there is actually some vocabulary that I can help out with, even though it's a part of their everyday language use.
Right.
And then in general, the way they shared ideas about reality TV, I think they don't watch reality TV as much as, say, series. So it's nice that this was a focused activity when they had to share their opinion on what they think about the situation when there is a room and everybody should act naturally, but actually they are recorded and it's going to be on TV and so on and so forth. So I think it was nice to just train their brains to think about it and want to talk about it. And they had a lot to say, very, very mature things as well, like about, voting for those shows and things like that.
Yeah, I was impressed, yeah.
And also, I believe with repeating those summary statements and talking about the true or false, they actually started using those words of the text already. So it was nice to see that they started trying to focus on the vocabulary. I wanted them
Is that where you see the vocabulary aim being addressed or met when they're...
Partly yes, partly that they were actually able to start working with those or using those, but also I think the vocabulary aim ended up being more extended than just simply focusing on the vocabulary of the texts. So from the very beginning, with the mentioned examples and talking about quiz shows and talking about cartoons and all those different things, there were way more words coming up to the surface than what I expected.
Okay.
And that was nice. And also trying to justify what they were saying with the use of, there were some difficulties with, like, please use the text or not just your own opinion. I think that was a nice obstacle because then I could kind of force them to do that for me, to focus on the text instead of sharing their own opinion. But in the end, a combination is born where they have read something, but they also have their own opinion and they can make judgment based on those two things.
Right.
Not simply what they feel.
Yeah. Well, in terms of what you might do differently, you might have done differently, you've mentioned the idea of maybe underlining the...
I think with instructions, sometimes I should listen to myself beforehand more, because it sounds all clear in my head. But once I start uttering those words, I realize that my instructions are not as clear as I intend them to be. So with this thing, with the true or false statements, true or false statements, saying partly the underlining, but partly also please stick to the text. So find your answers from very simple instructions that I didn't really think about. And also...
I thought you were actually... I just thought you did say that, perhaps more in the feedback stage. But okay.
Yeah.
You've mentioned earlier the idea of actually telling them to go in and underline the things that support the true or false statement. What else might you have done differently?
Maybe the feedback sections, or, I'm not sure if the feedback stages were not a bit too long. Like, as I've said, I'm used to doing more pair work, and feedback would really be feedback that I consider important, or I have heard about when I was walking around monitoring them. And so maybe I shouldn't worry about feedback if I've already given a lot of feedback during the pair work, or if they do the summary activity where they have to match the statements with the paragraphs, and I ask them to discuss the paragraphs one by one in pair, maybe I shouldn't spend as much time on doing that one more time together as a group as I did.
Okay.
Because it would be doubling the same activity, and I have to trust them, or it's my role to make sure that they did it in the pair work stage. Then I should not just make myself feel better about the whole thing because I can hear it all at the end.
Repeat it. How about building on this lesson in the future? So, in the next 1 or 2 or 3 lessons, how are you going to build on this in terms of topic or language or skills? Or
well, there are going to be first direct activities with this set of vocabulary. So of course we check the homework, of course we work with these definitions. And then I think I'll give them a lot of time to work on their own true or false statements, doing several rounds. I'm not sure if they will find it the easiest to use these words, so probably writing activities will come handy where they have to include these words to come up with. I sometimes make them do mini presentations to each other, just, you know, an oral practice kind of a thing, like 2 or 3 minutes, but I would time it. So I would say, fine, you have this list of words, please talk about TV in general, and the other one has to take how many words you used, those kinds of activities. And then I think it would be nice to do a very formally structured debate on the topic of reality TV too, where they would be asked to use this. And then we are moving on to talk more about communication in general, so not only TV genres, but mobile phones and the internet. And then it will be a nice bridge too.
Is there anything that you haven't mentioned or that you have that you've learned about your teaching or about the group or anything that, you know, is in terms of your broader development?
Well, I think in these situations, I can see which students are the ones who don't talk at all or very, very little when it comes to talking up front. So I'm not talking about pair work, but when it comes to talking to me. And I think I don't spend enough time on trying to make them feel more relaxed about formal talking, because they seem to be very relaxed when they talk to each other, but I want it to be similar to talking in front of the whole group. That's why speaking activities are very important for me, and I think I should do even more, because I can see that there were a couple of girls in the back who I know much more. So it's basically confidence building too, of course. And then I think in general, in teaching, we tend to assign a lot of reading activities as homework because we don't want to waste a lot of time on it in class, since we can do so many other things like listening, speaking, writing, and so on and so forth. And so it's like getting it out of the way. But this was a good example for how important it is to do it on the spot and how many different tasks you can do, like this summary thing, like a more complicated way of doing the true or false. So I would really like to try doing more of this and designing my own activities to
in
already
class.
existing reading tasks. Yeah. So this was a good proof of why and how I should do more of this.
That sounds great. Okay, well, I really, really enjoyed the lesson, and I think the students did too. So thank you.
Thanks.